everyone, in this video we're going to be getting technical, and by technical I mean more than what paint job looks good on that blaster, or how to get your ARs out with the missile, or something like that. Today we're going to be talking about batteries, in specific batteries and Nerf modding. With flywheel blasters still being a very popular platform to work with because of how much variety there is in terms of batteries and motors and wiring and all that stuff, and a lot of people trying their hands out with electronic modding for the first time, I thought I would take the top 5 most popular batteries, or the ones that I see come up the most in discussions, and go over the pros and cons of each. So put on your thinking caps and let's dive into it. The 5 big batteries that come up a lot in discussion are 9 volts, AA's, C's, D's, because they're basically all the same thing. More about that later. Trust fires / ultra fires, IMRs, and LiPos. So let's start with 9 volts. 9 volts are a really easy way for a lot of people to see that someone is new to the hobby, but 9 volts really suck, but I understand kind of the appeal to them. 9 volts or 18 volts with 2 9 volts in series is really appealing compared to like 6 volts in a strafe. Doesn't take a lot of wiring to just hook them up, and the sound can be very pleasing for someone starting with flywheels. It sounds much more aggressive than the stock 6. Outside of using 9 volts for say like LED work or some small aesthetics, 9 volts are terrible for Nerf modding. They are the bottom tier battery. Do not use them. Don't even think about using them for flywheels or say even a stampede. 9 volts suffer from low output in terms of amperage, terrible voltage sag, very short lifespan, and they are costly. 9 volts are more costly than some people think, and there is really no reason to be using them except for like LED work. If for some reason you want to use like the worst of the worst battery in terms of Nerf modding, 9 volts are for you. For everyone else, don't even touch them. The next battery on our list is the AA, C or D battery, depending on what blaster you're using. They're all the same thing, except C's and D's have longer battery lives than, say, AA's or AAA's. But they're all 1.5 volts, just with different lifespans. Compared to 9 volts, AA's are actually a better option. I won't say they're much higher up on like the battery tier, but they are a better option. 9 volts are really just like quintuple A's or quadruple A's or some ridiculously really small AA stacked together, tack welded, and thrown into a small package known as the 9 volt. AA's have higher output, not too much of a higher output, but a higher output and longer lifespan than 9 volts, and when you stack them together, they can make a nice little battery pack for things like a Stampede if you put a slightly higher string force than what you get with your stock Stampede. However, I would not recommend using AA's for anything more than stock or slightly overstock blasters. Yes, they're better than 9 volts, but this is still like lower tier batteries we're talking about. So if you were to throw AA's, like say an 8-pack of AA's at something like a 20-pound spring in a Stampede, you're going to have a terrible time and your batteries are going to wear out very, very fast. AA's are just good for a slight boost in performance if you stack them together, nothing more. Before I continue, the next 2 battery types I'm going to be talking about, I'm referring to their 14500 size variants. This means the size of a AA. The third battery on this list is one that comes up with debate a lot. There are people who absolutely despise this battery, and there's people who really, really like it. I'm talking about ultra fires, truss fires, and really anything fires. I'm going to be calling them truss fires because that's just easy for me to do. Truss fires have a lot of negatives that are brought up whenever they come up. People bring up the terrible voltage sag with them, and people bring up the horrible output with them, and they are always mislabeled. You will never find a truss fire that is actually honestly labeled. So when you're looking for truss fires or ultra fires, be very wary and actually look into them a little bit more than just, this site says it has 2,000 milliamps on it, I'm gonna buy it, because they are probably lying. And you can get better things for around the same price. There's a lot of negatives to truss fires and ultra fires. With all the negativity surrounding truss fires, I actually like them and will recommend truss fires. I see them as kind of like a gateway battery. They provide more of a boost to your blaster than say just stock AA's, and they're not too expensive. If someone's looking for a simple boost to their strafe, truss fires are a great way to get it, and they're very easy to maintain. A lot of people bring up how dangerous the chemistry is, but I have yet to see one fail or catch fire, do anything like that, and there have been no reports that I know of a truss fire catching fire in this hobby. So I do like truss fires. However, there are way better options than truss fires out there. Yes, they are nice batteries. But if you don't mind spending a little bit more money, you might as well get eFest IMRs. IMRs are like little powerhouses inside of a AA size battery. They're used in the vape modding community, and they've been slowly making their way into the Nerf modding community, and IMRs are just awesome. If you don't mind spending a bit more money than you would on truss fires, IMRs are for you. They run about $20 for a pack of 4, and you can also use your truss fire charger on IMRs, and you can get IMR chargers for about $14 to $16 for a very, very nice one. IMRs have a much higher output than that of truss fire, so if you put them into something like a Strife, expect really good results even with more overhauled motors. However, there are 2 disadvantages that I can see to using IMRs. The first one being that they can and will shrink smaller contact springs. If your contact springs are smaller or thinner than a Strife stock battery tray's contact springs, you might need to reinforce it or find a better alternative. I've used 4 IMRs instead of a stock Strife, and they seem to work very well with no shrinking or bluing of the springs in there, so that's kind of what I have to compare it to. The second disadvantage is something that I don't see as a disadvantage, and a lot of other people won't, but some people will, and that is you will need to upgrade your internal wiring with IMRs. Stock Nerf wiring is very, very thin, and it will heat up from using something like IMRs. Stock Nerf switches are just really weak by themselves, and they will need a replacement because they will fry and burn with not too much of an upgrade. I know some people get away without doing it, but you should be doing this stuff anyway, at least from my point of view. However, if you don't mind spending a bit more money than truss fires for something that's even better, IMRs are awesome, and I highly recommend them. They are great little powerhouses if you don't want to make the big investment into something like LiPos. Which brings us to the last battery on this list, and that is the LiPo. If I had to compare LiPos to something, truss fires would be like a PS3, and LiPos would be an X99 platform PC. The initial cost for it is pretty high for a lot of people, but holy crap, is it a workhorse, and you can throw so much at it. There are a lot of positives that I can say about LiPos, but really only 2 disadvantages that I can see with them. The first being with that comparison that I did. The first big disadvantage for a lot of people is the initial cost. Things like a charger can cost anywhere from $30 to $45 for a very good one. You will have to replace your wiring with better wiring for the LiPos. You'll have to get connectors for the LiPos. You'll have to upgrade your switches to even better ones. It's just kind of a big initial investment that can run you quite a lot of money. The second disadvantage to LiPos is maintenance. If you are not willing to take care of your LiPos will not take care of you, and there are horror stories to back that up. If you are not willing to do the research on how to store your LiPos properly, charge them properly, discharge them properly, or handle them properly, don't go with LiPos, because you need to know this stuff if you're going to have a good time with them. If you're not willing to handle your LiPos properly, they can catch fire, and there are stories about this happening, and the lifespan of them will degrade. With the negatives out of the way, there are so many positive things to say about LiPos. The first and biggest one that I could think of was being able to kind of customize or specify what LiPo you want. There is a LiPo for everything out there. If you want a LiPo that fits under your Strife's jam door, there is one out there for you. If you want a LiPo that can handle like 60 motors in your Rapid Strike, there is probably a LiPo out there for you. The best part about LiPos is being able to pick and choose the specifications for what you want to use it for. You get to choose between your discharge rate, your milliamp hours, how big or small you want it to be. There is just so much variety with LiPos, and you will find one that's suitable for your build. Another great part about LiPos is the cost. I'm not talking about the initial investment, I'm talking about after the initial investment. LiPos are cheap. If you want a LiPo that's perfect for a bladed Rapid Strike, it's going to cost you anywhere from $8 to $13 depending on different specifications you want with it. They are insanely cheap and a much better option than say IMRs or truss fires after the initial investment. I have to keep specifying after the initial investment because the initial investment can be rather large, but after that, things get very, very cheap, which is great. Another positive about LiPos is that the specification of that LiPo is going to be the specifications of that LiPo. Unless you go to some really sketchy website, what they put on the webpage is usually very true. If you go to a legitimate website like hobbyking.com, what they put there is what you should expect. Unlike truss fires where they can just throw like, oh, this is, 2 billion milliamp hours when it'll really only be like 100. So That's very nice about lipos. The other advantages to lipos really fall under the first two things I said about them, which is you can specify them to be really whatever you want and the cost. Other than that, lipos are basically your top tier battery. There's really nothing that can beat them if you're willing to make the investment for them, so that's why I put it last. So there you have it. That is your pros and cons list of the different batteries that you see come up in the nerfing hobby. So for a recap, 9 volts are crap, don't touch them. AA's are fine for stock or near stock stuff. Trust fires are good if you want to get into, upgrading your batteries. IMRs are great and you should use them, and lipos are basically the king of kings in terms of overhauling your blaster, and they should be what you eventually get because there is really no reason why you shouldn't unless you can't afford it. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope a lot of you learned some new stuff about batteries, and as always, have a great day wherever you are.